Welcome to the Motor Carriers Insurance Education Foundation monthly truck stop webinar. Truck stops are presented the second Thursday of each month at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. These webinars are open to members of the foundations and to their insureds. These webinars are presented as an industry update, and the current information is for learning, not for CE credit. If you're interested in CE credit, the foundation does provide 12 hours of CE each year through another program at a different time. If you have any questions about the CE, please visit our website at MCIEF.org or email the office at trs@mcief.org. If you have any questions during this webinar, please type them in the chat window. They will be answered as time allows or responded to after the webinar via email. If you experience any audio problems or other problems here, please send us a note in the chat window or call our office at 800-741-484. We'll attempt to correct the problems as soon as possible. Today's webinar, we're talking about what happens at a crash site and how to prepare our insureds for a crash, and after the crash and documentation. The important part that we're going to talk about here is, can we help our insured be better insured by doing everything possible to make sure the truck's safe, the driver's safe, the hours of conformance, but also realizing that when the crash happens, the plaintiff's attorneys will use information against us in the court systems if everything's aren't done properly. So this is where we're going to touch base here, and I got Stephen and Joseph part of this. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, gentlemen, and take it over from here.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Steve Arndt. I'm a human factors engineer, scientist. I've been in the business of investigating accidents and collisions for about 23 years, both in response to events after they occur, as well as proactive evaluations of safety practices and policies. Joseph?
Yes, hi, my name is Joseph Neal. I'm a professional engineer that operates in the field of accident reconstruction and failure analysis. I've investigated thousands of accidents at this point, and have many focuses, but one of them is commercial motor vehicles, as well as performing inspections and data interpretation from those commercial motor vehicles.
And listeners, we'll also give you more information about their companies at the very end here, but we thought we'd introduce these people. So we got someone that deals with the human nature, someone that deals with facts. So that's a good combination today. So we'll balance the two of them. I look forward to moving. Go ahead, gentlemen.
All right. So before we get started, I would ask that you take a moment and put yourself in the position of a truck driver in one of your insured's position, one of your customers, one of your customers' employees. For the next minute, just imagine you are driving along a rural country road. It's just before dawn. You know the route, but you're not so familiar with it that you know every turn, hill, and valley. The weather's been rainy, but it's just stopped. You're alert, you're awake, it's your normal shift. You got the radio on, it's not too loud. Your cell phone is not in use. There's been no traffic around you for minutes at a time. You come to a gradual bend in the road, and this is your view. What do you do? As you ponder what's ahead of you, your view is changing. It's changing fairly rapidly now. By this point in time, it's too late. Any decision you make will result in an adverse outcome. We know that after this occurs, there are a series of things that are going to take place, and including your recollection of events, your recounting of what occurred. You've called 911, you've rendered assistance if you can. You're now off to the side of the road, and the police are doing their investigation. The investigators are questioning you. There are witnesses to the scene. The scene is changing over the course of time. It now looks like this. do your memories, your recollections fit with what you're seeing now? You have a 4-lane road, wide shoulders on each side, clearly defined markings on the road. You're being asked by the police or the investigators what happened. You're asked to explain how the collision happened. What we're going to do over the next 40 minutes is ask you to think about these things from the perspective of your driver, from your insured's perspective. And we're going to give you ways to evaluate an incident, crash report, recounting of events, deposition testimony, so that it helps you understand what maybe have gone through your insured's mind, your driver's mind, what the police are doing and how they're viewing the situation, and what a scientist or engineer could do to assist you in evaluating the risks and the values of certain cases and how to develop the investigation. As scientists and engineers, we understand some of the questions that the drivers are going to have, the trainers are going to have, managers will have, and that the administrators and employees of a company will be asked in certain follow-up investigations. And these are probably familiar to you if you've been involved in litigation. Questions that a seasoned expert will have answers to. A person who understands the how the legal system works will be able to answer. Joseph's going to address how the actions of a company and their drivers can be used to answer this type of improper and unfair question in a way that doesn't diminish the importance of safety, but also recognizes the importance of the process of moving materials over the roadway in an efficient and effective manner. We'll address from the human factors and the vehicle side how the data that's available to be evaluated can be analyzed by competent scientists and engineers that can help you and the drivers know what the correct answer to this type of a question is, even in the face of a seemingly authoritative analysis from an inspector, from a responding police officer, from eyewitnesses and crash scene investigators. Also, I'll be back after Joseph talks for a while to talk about the human element of a crash and how the crash reconstruction and recollections can be very inaccurate for numerous reasons and not something that's on purpose. Joseph will go through some examples to show how the proper analysis can help you categorize facts into those that may be accurate but irrelevant to the causation of the accident, to aid you and your clients so as not to become bound up by things that may be portrayed as relevant and critical when they're actually not. All of this presumes that drivers and companies want to get their cargo to their destination safely. They want to get home safely. They're seeking to be efficient and effective while treating the other drivers on the road as part of a shared community with the same goals. With that in mind, I'm going to turn over the presentation now to Joseph, and he's going to go through some of the specialties he works with and some of the things and facts that he evaluates through his investigations. Joseph?
Thank you, Steve. It starts with creating a culture of safety within the organization. Successfully performing a driver inspection is required to obtain a CDL, but when a new employee is hired, does the employer train the new employee in the inspection and reporting process? How does the employer document this training program and driver progress? Is there follow-up, and how is that documented? These are the kinds of questions that could be asked in the event that an incident does occur.
Hold on a second. Let me put 2 cents in. For you who, we're talking about crash sites here, but this subject that I talked to both Joseph and Stephen about is also the future CSA. Gentlemen, you might spend a second here, but most everybody who's listening to us understands that the CSA is supposedly being reevaluated and restructured. And what we see now won't happen in the future as far as the rating. There'll be no more peer groups, that kind of stuff. And the new system is supposed to try to evaluate someone, the safety of a culture of safety. And this is the response, item response theory is not one thing, but everything the insured does. So as you listen to this, you also need to think about this if you're a retail agent or insurance company, that we need to talk to our insureds about this, not only to avoid crashes, but also to get through this new safety system or this new evaluation system, or that will be used against us also in a court situation, and or will impact their ability to get loads and also to get insurance.
All right, thank you. So we're not going to go into the details of the inspection process, but rather the effects of properly performing an inspection and how poor documentation can be an issue. Driver inspection can identify issues with the vehicle that may affect the vehicle's performance. The purpose of the driver vehicle inspection report, or DVIR, is to ensure that the vehicle is safe to operate, to ensure maintenance was performed by any issues found by the previous driver, and to document that process. Ultimately, the responsibility falls on the insured, the motor carrier, the owner of the vehicle, that it is fit to operate on the roadway. If there is an issue that would put the vehicle out of service, it needs to be resolved before the vehicle leaves the terminal. DOT inspectors can perform an inspection once the vehicle has left the terminal, and if a out of service issue is found, the commercial vehicle and load could end up stranded and the repair costs higher. Therefore, the owner has several incentives to only allow vehicles that are inspected and in proper operating condition on the road, to get the load to the destination on time and without incident that was potentially preventable. The driver vehicle inspection reports helps the motor carrier owner know when maintenance is required. The next person to drive the vehicle needs to sign off that the maintenance was performed. This creates a redundancy in checking that the vehicle meets the criteria to operate over the road. Driver vehicle inspection reports are required to be kept for 3 months, while a claim may take longer to file than that 3-month period. Secure the documentation of the driver inspection reports, as they may be useful later on. Other things to consider: what training has the driver completed? Does the motor carrier have periodic safety meetings? Where is the documentation of who was present at those meetings and what was the agenda for those meetings? Maintaining these reports and these records and ensuring that inspections are completed can be used to defend against a disgruntled former employee's statements that the motor carrier did not take inspection reports seriously. Securing records when an incident occurs can be useful if a lawsuit is filed 2 years after the 3-month requirement.
I'm sure you all have been involved in crashes, though, where the plaintiff attorney asks for these records and they're not available. Then you have a spoilization question. So that's the other side of this. If they don't retain these records, then you have a spoilization situation where the judge will say, assume the worst happened that part. You not only can help you defend it, but if you don't have it, can end up costing more money.
That is correct. And not only to assume the worst, not only are they instructed to assume that the worst could happen, often they'll have someone who is going to find all of the issues that may be the worst case scenario. Right. So you want to speak to your local counsel, as these things do, vary from state to state, the laws for how long a lawsuit or a claim can be filed. So reporting, documenting, ensuring maintenance is completed to a commercial motor vehicle, even for minor issues, creates a track record that repairs and maintenance are being performed. If a vehicle has a minor issue, even if the issue does not meet the out of service criteria and was not a contributing factor to the cause of the incident, does not mean that there will not be an effort to attach that issue to the cause of the incident. The maintenance of the vehicle is everyone's responsibility: the driver, the mechanics, and for companies, management. For owner-operators, much of this responsibility falls on them. Ensuring the annual inspection is performed, periodic maintenance is scheduled and done, and that the work was performed by a qualified mechanic can show that safety is a priority. If there are gaps in the maintenance and repair record, there is no proof that service was performed. As previously discussed, if there was a minor issue present with the vehicle before the incident, missing repair records can bolster the claim that the vehicle was not being properly maintained. These issues can build on each other and potentially lead to higher total damages. In the event of a collision, DOT or the police will perform an inspection of the vehicle. Sometimes an inspector will attribute damage caused from the collision to a pre-existing out-of-service criteria. Maintenance records and driver vehicle inspection reports can provide supporting documentation that the vehicle left the terminal in proper operating condition. An engineering inspection of the commercial motor vehicle, along with the facts of the subject incident, can show that the damage was caused by, not a cause of, the subject incident. Take, for instance, a DOT inspector found an air leak during a post-incident inspection and claims that the vehicle should have been out of service. The report states that there was no direct damage in the area of the leak. A third-party mechanical inspection was performed and found that there was, in fact, a leak. What was also found was damage to the lines at the back of the truck and evidence of stress in the air line at the connection where the leak occurred. The case was successfully made that the air leak was caused by the incident. What's more is the brakes were not a contributing factor to the cause of the incident, but the claim was that the driver neglected to inspect the vehicle and that the insured had a poor track record of driver inspections. The tractor was new with less than 50,000 miles. The driver vehicle inspection record showed no maintenance request for the subject vehicle for the prior 3 months. Records from the fleet showed that other vehicles had driver vehicle inspection reports citing maintenance issues that were resolved with the maintenance records before the vehicles were put back into service. Furthermore, a citation against the driver may be unwarranted, but accepting this at face value without a third-party investigation can be used as proof that the incident was the commercial driver's fault. An example of this is that a driver was involved in an incident and later left the employer for unrelated reason on bad terms. The former employee may state that the vehicle was poorly maintained and that management was dismissive of required maintenance reported by the driver. This can lead to a narrative that the insured neglected to maintain the vehicle and as a result contributed or caused the incident. Keeping driver inspection records, maintenance records, continuing education safety meetings with topics in attendance can provide evidence that the insured maintained safety as a priority. A third party inspection of the vehicle may provide physical evidence that the citation was unwarranted as the issue was caused by the incident. Trusting in the qualifications and capabilities of law enforcement to perform an inspection, to download and read and interpret data from increasingly complicated electronic systems within your trucks. This is becoming more and more of an issue as the people who are doing the accident investigation with the police or the DOT may not be trained in analyzing the data, but only in retrieving the data. So far, we have covered what can be done prior to an incident to lessen the likelihood that an incident would occur as a result of vehicle maintenance. What happens when an incident does occur? How do we move forward with the evidence preservation? As we've discussed, secure the records for the subject vehicle. Also preserving the physical evidence from the incident, such as vehicle damage, roadway evidence, event data recorder reports, and mechanical condition of the commercial vehicle. The engine control module, the ECM, sometimes called the ECU or the engine control unit, may have the capacity to store event data. Depending on the engine manufacturer, not the truck brand, and the age of the engine, there is a possibility to store event data on the ECM. What data and how the data is stored varies from one engine manufacturer to another and from one generation of engines to another. Some manufacturers store snapshot data when a fault code is tripped. Some store hard braking, sudden deceleration events. Some store the last stop record. This type of data that is stored can provide vehicle speed, brake application status, and more, sometimes up to a minute's worth of data in 1-second intervals. Some modules will record speed data before and after the event threshold is triggered. Knowing what type of data is stored on a given module is important for what happens next with the vehicle. For example, a last stop record is just what it sounds like. What was the vehicle doing before the last time the ignition key was cycled off? If the vehicle's ignition is cycled on again, a new last stop record would be created and could overwrite, the previous last stop record, thus potentially losing the relevant data. Therefore, the data needs to be retrieved by a qualified individual before the vehicle is put back into service. If data is retrieved from the ECM and the investigating officer attributes the data to the subject incident, the first question should be, is the investigator correct that the data is from the incident? Improperly attributing data to the subject incident and taking that at face value could be inaccurate and skew the results of the investigation. For example, certain ECUs can store multiple hard brake events, and they're not always reported in sequential order. The investigator has to know how to determine what hard brake event, if any, was from the subject incident. A third-party engineering inspection can determine if the data was in fact from the subject incident, and furthermore, if the data being reported is correct. An example of this is if the vehicle is not equipped with ABS brakes. The ECM records tire speed, not ground speed. So if the wheels lock up, the ECU will report 0 miles per hour, but that is not necessarily the ground speed of the vehicle. Another example is if the vehicle begins to jackknife. The unit is not traveling in the same direction as the drive wheels are pointing. The vehicle reported speed may not be the same as the actual ground speed. Another example, and something that can be overlooked by someone without the proper training and experience, is if the programming of the ECM does not match the hardware on the vehicle. For the ECM to calculate the vehicle speed, it has to be programmed with the proper parameters. There is a series of factors that could lead to underreporting or overreporting of the vehicle speed. Taking a step back from the technical aspect of all of this, what does it mean? On new vehicles, it's unlikely but not impossible that the program in the ECM is incorrect. Older vehicles that have had driveline components replaced would need to be reprogrammed, and this should not be taken for granted that a technician did reprogram the software. This is why an engineering inspection of the components of the driveline is necessary to determine if the data reported is correct.
Joseph, also changing in tire size, would it not, from 1020s to 1022s, or now you got some of the units are being retrofitted with the wide tires on the back? That will affect the speed, would it not, too?
Absolutely. That's all part of the driveline system. So not only does changing the tire size, but tire wear over time can skew the results as well. Tire wear has a smaller impact than changing the tire size, but it can make a difference, and I have worked on cases where it in fact did. So if there is something that has been changed on the driveline, like the tires or the drive axle gear ratio, there is documented and peer-reviewed methods for analyzing the data and correcting the reported speed for the correct driveline. This all has to be taken in consideration with the physical evidence. An independent analysis of the physical evidence can verify or dispute the reported data. The results of the analysis could be the difference of the commercial vehicle going the posted speed limit or going over the posted speed limit before the incident occurred. Misinterpreting ECM data is not the only area that an engineering inspection could be useful. Another example of this is post-incident DOT inspection. Investigators can make mistakes in documenting the brake slack adjustment by simply writing down the wrong numbers or not understanding the effects of the vehicle out of service criteria in relation to the incident. This is why a third-party inspection can be useful. That third-party inspection can verify or contest the results of the DOT inspection. This is why I prefer photographic and video documentation, which can turn a he said, she said situation into a visual demonstrative of the results of the inspection. Furthermore, if an out-of-service criteria was present, was it a contributing cause to the subject incident? If the brakes were out of adjustment, but the driver was unaware that an incident was going to take place, did the brakes being out of adjustment cause or contribute to the incident? An example of this is a commercial motor vehicle traveling on a two-lane highway. A passenger vehicle disobeys a stop sign at a high rate of speed and travels into the lane of the commercial vehicle, and it impacts the rearmost axle, effectively T-boning the rear of the vehicle. Because of the length of the vehicle, the driver is already past the intersection when the impact occurs. Therefore, the brakes were never applied before the incident. Another example is a tractor towing a fully loaded semi-trailer traveling on an expressway at speed. A passenger vehicle merges into the lane of the commercial vehicle and applies full braking in front of it. The driver of the passenger vehicle later states that he missed his exit and didn't want to continue driving to the next exit. The commercial driver applies his brakes in an emergency situation and slows from 60 to 35 miles per hour when it impacts the passenger vehicle. A DOT inspection finds that 3 of the 10 brakes were out of adjustment and cites the commercial driver. The third-party inspection obtains the same results in the slack adjustment, but performs a full engineering inspection of the brake system. This includes measuring various brake components such as the drum diameter, shoe thickness, slack adjuster length, and other components. The engineer can now determine the brake force that was available on the vehicle. The analysis concludes that the brakes were out of adjustment, and had the brakes been within adjustment range, the difference in impact speed would have only been a few miles per hour lower, from 30 to 27 miles per hour, or potentially not at all. The takeaway, an incident would have occurred even if the brakes were in adjustment. The commercial vehicle contacting the rear of the passenger vehicle was because the passenger vehicle merged in front of it, effectively cutting the following distance and hard braking. I'll now turn this back over to Steve for the last section.
Thank you, Joseph. The last portion of the presentation today deals with some of the generation of documents, statements, witness review, factual accounting of events that are present in a post-collision scenario. And the thing to remember from this is that we're looking at how the information is gathered, how it's gathered affects the accuracy and the quality of the information, who gathers the information, what their experiences are. That affects the quality and the accuracy of the information. Overall, after a traumatic event, it's perfectly natural for those involved, including drivers, witnesses, police investigators, to want to completely explain how the accident or incident took place based on their view of the situation. Every bit of information has bias, not with the intention to create a false outcome, but rather because of inherent capabilities and limitations of people who are working with pressures associated with this type of an event. Each individual having their own set of data, their own experience, and their own theories about the incident. Each individual also knows the outcome before starting the investigation. Yet they're attempting to explain what unfolded to the drivers who had no such knowledge of the outcome prior to the event. And I'm going to give you a couple examples of this. We see statements, testimony, written, badge cam of drivers saying things like, "I never saw it." Yet the investigators will record it. The eyewitnesses will have said they heard it. At the time people are giving these statements, it is truly what they believe to be an accurate statement. The language that is used and the way the statements are given don't equate to a true understanding of what took place. No person in an accident talks like this. No one can be expected to talk like this except people who understand the science, who understand the physiology, who understand the accident reconstruction. But this is exactly what the science most often tells us. I can't tell you how many times the data and the accident reconstruction has shown that a driver actually did respond, that we have numerical digital data or physical evidence in the roadway that shows that at the time that the incident took place, the driver had responded, that the response was occurring, though too late to prevent the collision or materially change the outcome. People think in terms of identifying a stimulus. People don't think when they're recounting the incidents about what it takes to identify a stimulus in the road, to determine what that stimulus is, to evaluate potential responses to scenarios, then to begin to lift off the gas or to move your hands on the steering wheel, to begin to move your foot to the brake, all while checking your mirrors, all occurring before a collision, to be inconsistent with the data that they never saw it. They don't make that connection. What we look at and hope you'll be able to see after this presentation is the understanding of why these things occur. Typically, we look at these accidents and we find intermediate factors. The pedestrians were wearing dark clothes and came out of nowhere. It's another thing we hear, but will have darted out from behind an obstruction. The vehicle in the roadway was disabled, their headlights were off, or they were overturned, or they were sideways in the road. The vehicle was in a wrong place, in an unexpected position, in the middle of a 4-lane highway with a speed limit of 65 miles an hour, with plenty of room to pull off on the sides of the road, yet they decided to stop in the middle of the road. There are various other reasons why things can occur that the science will explain how the incident took place, why the incident took place, but that the witness statements and the recounting of the events and the eyewitnesses don't match up with. Another example that we see is the idea that the stimulus came out of nowhere. We all know that, and in hindsight, when asked, drivers will understand that things don't come out of nowhere. But the perception is that likely they had no expectation of this object. They had no idea that the lane change was going to be made, that the vehicle was hidden by another vehicle in the roadway, by some other physical obstruction in the roadway. Our memories and our recollection of events when we are providing feedback to investigators or in a deposition or in an accident report to our company don't take this into consideration. Typically, what happens is some other physical interaction took place. The vehicle turned in front of the driver in an unexpected way. There was a hidden driveway. The pedestrian or the bicycle came out from between parked cars. The vehicle came up from behind us at an incredible rate of speed that is unexpected on this type of a roadway. Traffic on the roadway blocked the view of the approach, or the other party was driving too fast and made an unexpected maneuver. Our analysis, the analysis of qualified scientists and engineers, can help you and your insureds explain what accident took place, but also we can help you understand that when you read this information, when you see this information, when you hear this type of a description, you can evaluate it from a scientific perspective as opposed to taking the position that either they're lying or they didn't know what happened. There's a third position, which is they're doing their best to recount the events and they don't make the connection that the scientists and engineers can make. A couple other examples. This is one that's becoming more prevalent in the type of accidents we're involved with, is that the driver responds, I just looked away for a second, or seemingly a second. And what we're finding is that historical research data shows that you can have certain glance times at what are typically normal things in the vehicle, your speedometer, your dash cluster, your mirrors. But as technology increases, as the distractions on the roadway increase, as the elements in a vehicle are increased, the normal scanning pattern for a driver naturally increases. And these things that are naturally having to be reviewed increase the overall safety of the process, but can affect a driver's recollection of events. And normally what occurs is individuals who are thinking about an accident in hindsight have terrible estimates of speed and distance. So while we take our eyes off the road in a normal pattern of behavior, a driver who is responding to an incident and being asked, how did it occur, after having seen the scene afterwards, standing on the shoulder and being questioned about it, is trying to reconstruct the incident in their mind and trying to make a evaluation of what they must have been doing to cause the accident. And it is unfortunate, and they're trying to be truthful and honest, and we deal with this in having to reconcile the facts, the science, with the testimony on a regular basis. We come back to our opening example, and now having heard what Joseph talked about and what I've talked about, you are questioned, your driver is questioned by an attorney or by the police and asked, in your statement, you said that you saw the brake lights in the distance for the car stopped partially in the road, that you checked your mirrors to get over, but it was too late, you were already on top of them. A perfectly reasonable explanation, knowing what occurred. However, the reality of the situation is that at the time that you perceived the lights in the distance, you had no idea what it was. You had no idea that it was a vehicle. The science can tell us that you couldn't tell that the vehicle was stopped in the road. The literature and the research can prove that there is no way that you could have perceived this vehicle as being a hazard in time to have prevented the incident. But convincing a witness or a driver that there was nothing you can do takes a good amount of work, a good amount of science, a fair amount of experience in this. And hopefully some of what we've done today will help you understand that. The science, the engineering, all leads us to try to convince you, your insured, your clients, that there are intervening factors in any accident, that we have to consider expectations of the drivers, familiarity with their vehicle and the roadway, physiological limitations of their physiological limitations, the limitations of the other drivers, the limitations of the pedestrians involved, perceptual limitations. What can you see? What can't you see? How does contrast affect the visibility of a vehicle or a pedestrian in the roadway? And then the limitations of physics. How fast can a vehicle stop? How fast can you apply the brakes? What is the lag in the system? All of these are important factors that have to be investigated thoroughly rather than taking the initial view of an accident based on simply the reports of well-intentioned drivers and investigators who may not be aware of all of the limitations that we have as humans and as the vehicle itself.
Joseph and Steve, the this is wonderful here. I spent a couple of minutes here at the very end. We got a little time here to bring some things out that I think is relevant. We talk all the time about the new theory of litigation where the plaintiff's attorneys are using what's called the reptilian theory. And everything that you all went through today are the things that are brought up at crash site to take away from what happened actually with the driver, but all that inspections and the records and the vehicle maintenance and the training are things they're bringing up to exasperate the cause, or exasperate the dollars, as you said, poured here. So it's important, I feel, and I'm sure you get involved in some of this stuff where you see those items be brought up. Do you have some examples or something that you all have been in the case where this technology you have, and as you talked about science, which is very important, all the items, the braking distance and all that become important?
Yes, and let me start out with, I give you a good example of the type of incidents that we deal with all the time. Are nighttime collisions with a vehicle stopped on the side of the road. The questions of, was the conspicuity tape in place? Were the lights on? Were the hazard lights on? And we're constantly trying to reconstruct both the inspection reports to determine whether or not these things were documented prior to the trip, as well as what does the investigation data collected show us about the condition of the vehicle. What can we determine was pre-incident condition versus post-accident information. And then from that, looking at same thing that Joseph has talked about, what was material. If we're talking about a low light accident with long distances and high speeds, then the presence or absence of one section of conspicuity tape on the rear of a trailer may have no bearing at all on a driver's ability to perceive a stopped truck or perceive that a collision is imminent. But it will be raised as the anchor element in how a company doesn't take safety seriously in maintaining their vehicles. And go ahead.
That's the culture of safety we talked about earlier that's being brought up. And I guess that's another way to say this is also the theory, the reptilian theory, where they're bringing all this stuff up, is they're trying to prove that the motor carrier is not paying attention to safety. Therefore, the public should penalize them, or the jury should penalize them, or the judge for not doing that. And that's more than punitive damage. We're talking about direct damages now, not just punitive damage. And the second part of it is the item response theory is also trying to point out the difference between the motor carrier who does everything right versus the motor carrier who got lucky and didn't have a crash. But that's a very relevant part. There was one other thing that we talked about earlier when we talked about slide that we did not include here. Spend a couple of seconds or a minute or two on the event recorders. I'm a big advocate of event recorders, both the forward-looking ones and the rear-looking ones. And it's, as we expressed to you earlier when we talked about putting these slides together, is that the event recorders, I don't know why they're not on every truck running down the highway, at least the forward-looking ones, and not the GoPro, but the ones that retain the information, very similar to the EMCs that you talked about, where you don't wipe out past history by moving the truck or how to properly read those things. But how often do you find that event recorders help establish early on how to handle the case? Either we got facts that we can defend, or we don't have any facts we can defend, so now it's time to settle.
That's great, and it's absolutely changing the way we do many of our analysis. And the way it's changing it is somewhat, we have to be careful because, one, we get a snapshot only. We get the last 5 seconds of data, maybe 10 seconds if we're lucky. In cases, we've actually had some cases where we've had minutes of data from a following vehicle. So how does that data get used? How does it create an accurate picture of this driver's specific behaviors in an incident and or the company's overall behaviors in their organization, their establishment of safe practices? We absolutely have had to switch some of our analysis to now explaining why a video camera at night designed to be efficient in recording some information can't be equated to what a driver can see, or how being able to play back a video and freeze frame it to show the moment that hazard lights in the distance became just visible in hindsight now can't be equated to what a driver should understand takes place. So while the proper analysis of event recorders can absolutely help insurance carriers and investigators evaluate the factual scenario, we have to be very careful that we educate our clients and their users how the data can be misused to misrepresent and to color investigation testimony improperly.
That's a good point here, but I know you say we need to understand it, but without those things, with those things, we have more things to show, both making our case either way than if we did not have them, even though we have to make sure it's used properly. I think that's what you're saying, that there are good things to have. They're changing a lot of the environment out in the road place. All this, we don't have to look at the social media to realize how the cameras and phones are changing how people look at even social media stuff. But the event recorders have that same effect, but it can be used right or wrong is what you're saying, and so you need to be able to properly interpret it.
Yep, they're a great tool, and they absolutely reduce uncertainty for everybody when used properly. Right.
On this last slide, give me a minute or two. Tell me about your organization and how they can contact you guys and that. And we appreciate you being here.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're Explico Engineering. We are headquartered in Novi, Michigan, but we have satellite offices in Chicago, Pennsylvania, and Florida. Our website is explico.com, and on there you can find all the different professionals that we have working and what their areas of expertise is. We also do work in the areas of biomechanics, so injury causation, as well as material science. So if a component fails at the material level, what does that mean and how could it have caused or contributed to the incident?
Thank you for that information. And guys, we really appreciate your time with us today. I know this is very beneficial. I'm already thinking about how to include some of this material in some of the presentations that we do and have you back and get more detail here. For everybody who's listening to this today, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat window and we will answer them later. For information about the Motor Carriers Insurance Education Foundation offering future here's our website again, MCIEF.org. Then you also can follow the group in LinkedIn that we have here. With that said, we're done.